sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that the underlying enactment, whatever it was, the policy, the law, we'd have to have an understanding of how the state or the government was just understanding that term to figure out whether or not someone was excluded. We do not have a definition for the court. And we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth-sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth-sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
Hello. Welcome to the 2026 broadcast year here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. The Supreme Court just heard arguments for and against letting men, play in women's sports. This is all wrapped up under a comfortable euphemism of trans rights. What it comes down to is letting men push women out of their spaces so men, especially mentally ill men, can feel better about themselves. I am not trans, clearly, but I have a unique insight into trans psychology because for 40 years I suffered from body integrity identity disorder, BIID. BIID, just like gender dysmorphia, is a psychological compulsion, a need, a drive to have the body, the physical body, mechanically altered by the modification and removal of functioning healthy body parts in order to have a physical appearance that matches a mental image. For most of my life, from being a child until I was 43 or 44 years old, was absolutely convinced that I was not whole or normal unless my left leg was amputated below the knee. Thank God I didn't find a doctor that would do that. And thank God I joined the Navy because obviously I couldn't be in the Navy if I had a leg amputated. A perfectly healthy leg amputated, cut off, permanently disabled in order to fit a mental image of what I was supposed to look like and be. About 43, 44 years old, as I was closing in on the end of my Navy career, I just kind of finally got over it. I got to a point where I was looking in the mirror and accepting comfortably that this me with two legs down there is the way things are supposed to be, but I never understood where it came from. Now, for me personally, the answer came when I was 51 years old, and I was diagnosed with level 2 autism. My mom ran a daycare when I was growing up, so we had autistic kids in the house. Now, back in the 1970s, when I was a little boy, the only autistics that were truly understood were those who were completely locked in their own head. I describe it as being in a glass bubble that separates me from the human race. I can see out, people can see in, but I'm looking through a curved bubble, which means things are distorted versus what they are. Think about how a lens bends light. Plus, sounds are attenuated to me coming through that bubble. That is that sense of isolation. In the 70s and early 80s, the only autistic kids that were really understood were those where that glass bubble they live in is opaque and soundproof. Once I was diagnosed at 51 years old, a lot of things came into focus. One, I was measured at having a genius level IQ. I just didn't demonstrate that growing up because most of that brain power was going to simple survival since I was doing this all by myself. One of my talents is communication and an innate understanding of psychology and a certain level of, ironically enough, behavior. And as a child, and children all want to do what adults say. We want to make adults proud. I could mask so fast, I didn't even know I was doing it. I was just automatically adapting to what the evaluators wanted to hear. Therefore, I was missed. Kind of sucks. Made my life very hard and very lonely for a very long time, but it was a tragedy of timing. But that diagnosis told me where the BIID came from. When I was a little boy growing up and I was begging for help. I'm screaming for help. And all the adults are telling me to stop being selfish, stop being immature, grow up, act my age, stop play acting, stop demanding attention, etc., etc. What I saw was kids with physical disabilities. Either kids in wheelchairs, kids who were sadly missing limbs, kids who had broken legs and were just on crutches. Kids with physical injuries and disabilities were loved and cared for, no questions asked. Unconditionally, they were cared for. A child's mind, even when it's brilliant as I am, even with that raw computing power I already had, is still an immature processor, thinking in macros. To a child's mind, I very quickly made the logical leap. I will be loved and taken care of. I will get help if I'm injured. For me to be loved, for me to be cared for, I have to be physically injured or disabled. It's a horrible thing for a child to believe. It's a tragedy of timing simply because autism wasn't understood that much back then. So I spent most of my life thinking that in order to be healthy, I had to be mutilated. And mutilation is the damage, the intentional damage and removal or removal of functional healthy body parts for some purpose. A doctor can mutilate you if he or she cuts off your penis simply because you feel like a girl. But that penis was healthy. Your body was healthy. Mutilation is cutting off a girl's breasts simply because she or the adults telling her what to think decided she's actually a boy. Those breasts were healthy tissue. It was growing. Her body was developing naturally. This whole argument has come to a head at the U.S. Supreme Court. It should never have gotten there because to anybody who went to high school biology, actually a little more basic, anybody with functioning eyeballs can see there is a vast difference physiologically between human males and human females. We are mammals. Mammals are sexually dimorphic. One is bigger than the other overall and sexually binary. That's the normal course. Yes, we always get that argument. Well, what about that 0.01% that is intersex? Well, yeah. What about that 0.1% of people who are born without hands? Does that mean we let them in the military even though they don't have a hand because a genetic screw up took the hand away? Tyrus said it the best on Gutfeld the other night.
This is a simple thing. I've said it before on the show, and I'm just going to say it again. The difference between men and women is very simple. A man's biggest fear when it comes to a woman, since we're going to put everybody in a tent, is being embarrassed by her or her laughing at him. That's what a man fears from a woman. A woman fears a man killing her. That's why they don't play together.
Yeah.
She can hurt your feelings. You can physically destroy her.
We're afraid of women using words against us to make us look stupid. Women, their biggest fear where men are concerned is getting murdered, getting raped. Oh, I shouldn't use that word. YouTube will ban me and take away my money. Oh, wait, never mind. I don't monetize these so I can talk freely and not be punished by digital overlords who think they know better than I do. Men are afraid of ridicule by women. Women are afraid of physical assault, rape, and murder, and beatings by men. Gender dysmorphia is a tragic mental illness. The trans cult gave itself away at the Supreme Court when their lawyer could not define sex. She was begging the court to rule in the favor of the trans cult who are a bunch of adults that are trying to push an ideology based on the glorification and celebration of mental illness and mutilation onto kids. Kids who don't know better, kids whose processors are not developed enough to argue back. We don't let kids drive a car until they're 16 because they don't have the mental processor developed yet to make good judgment calls on the road. We don't let kids join the military where they could get killed until they're 18 because the mental processor is not developed enough for that kind of lifelong decision. We don't let kids get tattoos before they're 18. Maybe some states 16, but most places 18 because the mental processor is not yet developed enough for them to make a good decision that's going to affect them lifelong. But these trans cultists are out saying those same kids have enough of a developed processor to sterilize themselves, cause themselves severe sexual dysfunction for the rest of their life. The lawyer could not define gender or sex for the court. She is saying, though, that Title IX should not be interpreted to deny opportunities based on sex because there's not a definition of sex. But Title IX was written with the inherent definition of sex that men and women are separate. The fact the lawyer could not make the argument gave the whole game away. It's about naked power, pun intended. Title IX was written and enacted based on sex. Humans are male and female. Males are bigger, stronger, faster, and more aggressive overall than females. It doesn't mean females are less capable. It means that our species is built in two halves, and each half has special gifts, special strengths, and special areas in which we evolved as a species in order to make sure that together both halves formed a united whole that the species could survive. But these activists want power. That's all this is about, naked power. This is a bunch of adults who are celebrating mental illness, a tragic mental illness. Think about that. If you are so touched in the head that you believe the only way for you to live healthy is by lopping off your genitals, taking hormones to force your body to artificially look like the opposite sex. If you cannot accept yourself as you were born, that's tragic. I could not accept myself as I was born for over 40 years. Thank God I never found a doctor who cut off my leg. Thank God my interest in a career in the Navy precluded me from even exploring that option. I have a lot of psychological issues. All of them stem from being autistic, the neurological problems that causes with relationships, with how I function, with how I handle stress. But the one thing I was cured of was body integrity identity disorder. And I was cured of that before I was diagnosed with autism because it took over 30 years, 30 years, 2/3 of my current lifetime. I'm 54, so 2/3 of my lifetime so far to get over it. It's a lot of work, a lot of loneliness. I don't wish that kind of loneliness on anybody. I don't wish having to go through that by yourself on anybody. It was horrible. It was a horrible way to live. But I got to a point of accepting me the way I'm supposed to be. And then years later, the autism diagnosis happened and explained where the whole damn thing started from. Doesn't mean trans people are autistic. Gender dysmorphia can come from a lot of places, including being a child who's growing up normally until all the adults around you start saying, oh, well, you prefer playing soccer to playing with Barbie dolls? You're really a boy. We need to get you top surgery, cut off those little bitty boobies that are starting to grow, and we'll stick you on hormone blockers so your vagina doesn't develop. Oh, it doesn't matter that you're 12. You'll be fine for the next 70 years on hormones that are artificial being pumped into you. Misogyny. The oppression of women is trying to creep up in our culture, being used by men, mostly men, and a few women who want political power to force the rest of us to live as they want. So if you cannot define sex, but you're arguing that a sex-defined law is unfair, you have no argument. I'm a normal gay guy. Yes, I'm gay. I like dudes. Wish I didn't. Kind of wish I was straight because, at the very least, my chance of finding a partner for the rest of my life would be exponentially greater. He also wouldn't be conflicts with the Christian church. But I'm a man. I'm a normal man because I know the difference between men and women. The psychopaths pushing the trans cult also know that difference. They're trying to erase it by changing language. I'm not a cis man. I am a man. Cis man, cis woman is a slur. Call me a cis man, that is the same thing as calling me a faggot. That's a slur. Evil needs good people to say nothing. I'm saying something. Share this video around. This is a gay guy who went through a trans-adjacent mental illness and got through it. So I know what true trans people are dealing with. The only thing difference between body integrity, identity disorder, and gender dysmorphia is that I didn't have a question about being a man or a woman. I knew I was a guy. I wasn't trying to lop off my penis. I wasn't trying to take artificial hormones to grow breasts. It's the only difference. Base root of both of those is a need, a pathological need to mechanically alter the function of the body, to mutilate the body to fit a mental image. Don't be silent. Stand up for women. True transgender people, people have true gender dysmorphia and can only survive by making that transition under competent medical care, deserve compassion and respect, but they don't deserve to erase our entire culture. Sorry, they don't get the women's locker rooms and they don't get the men's locker rooms. So there's a difference between how you expressed your masculinity or femininity and trying to shove women into the closet. Go and do some great things.